Hello, and a warm welcome to the latest DMT podcast with my guest, Lia Vollack. Lia is the producer of MJ the Musical, currently selling out at the Prince Edward Theatre in London, as well as being a huge hit on Broadway. We all know Michael Jackson's music, but how do you translate it into a Broadway and West End smash hit? And how does the producer link into this? What's their role? And we're about to find out. Hello, Lia.
Hi.
Thank you for taking the time to speak to us today. I think we should just get right into the questions about MJ. What would you like UK audiences to take away from MJ the Musical? Why should they come and see it?
Thanks. It's great to be talking with you. I think the reason, hopefully, that people come to see the show is because we have worked really hard to create a great theatrical experience. So we've worked with very A-level designers, amazing director, choreographer, everyone is sort of the top of their game in the theater to create something very special. But it's a great theatrical celebration and a great, enjoyable, joyous night at the theater.
Well, you can't get better than that. I have to say, when I went to see it on Broadway, it was one of those things, you're not quite sure what you're going to see in advance when you hear, because there had already been Thriller Live, the Michael Jackson Experience, or whatever it was called. So I wasn't sure if it was going to be anything like that. But when I got there, I have to say, I was personally blown away by it. And it's a very different approach to anything that has gone before in terms of treating the Michael Jackson legacy of music.
Yeah, and I think that was really important to us. The story is told from a moment in time as Michael is preparing for the Dangerous tour. So you really get to see this sort of behind the scenes of the way that Michael worked, what his creative process was, set it in this one specific rehearsal room, which then transforms into all of these other locations and moments and recreations of choreography. The story is the present day of 1992 as he prepares for the tour, but then there are moments from his past, and then there are also moments of sort of Michael's imagination, and those expand into big choreography sequences using his songs.
There are so many iconic songs and dance moves that he's famous for. How difficult was it to choose which songs or routines to include in the repertoire? And also just from we all understand director, we all understand choreographer, but in terms of being the producer on that, how did you influence that?
I spent a lot of time very, very closely with the creative team. I started working with Lynn Nottage, the writer, very early on, and it was just the two of us sort of working, talking about what story we wanted to tell. I think Lynn was very, very interested in telling the story of his creativity, but also how the sort of father figures in his life, his father, Joe, Berry Gordy, and Quincy Jones, all influenced his creativity and how he became the artist that he was. And so every moment and the songs that we chose actually sort of specifically contribute to showing that development and that progression. We obviously also, it's a huge catalog of music. It's sort of staggering as a producer when I started looking at this and then started realizing how many huge hits there were. It was, of course, a really daunting prospect, but we knew there were some songs that we absolutely must include, like Beat It, like Billie Jean, like Thriller, like Smooth Criminal. But then we also wanted to find some other real gems in his catalog as well that were very special, that could contribute to the overall storytelling in a great way, and pulled certain songs from obviously Dangerous, since that was the album he was working on. But what we've done musically is, for the contemporary time, there are no songs that are later in his catalog that happen in the present day of 1992, but in those moments where we go into Michael's imagination, we're actually open to using the entire breadth of the catalog. We also, in the moments of memory, go back and have songs from the Jackson Five, songs from his days with the Jacksons, like Dancing Machine, for example. And so it was a very long, complex process. Chris Wheeldon and also our music supervisor, David Olsenberg, and Lynn and I all worked together to figure out how to achieve real storytelling while also delivering, all of that great music.
I mean, you mentioned the gems of the catalogue. Some of it is just exhilarating when you're there, I think. It's not what you expect at all. And then you're taken on this journey, and it deserves the success, I humbly think, because of the way you've weaved that together. I was just interested the other day, I was reading about Judy Kramer talking about how she chose the creative team for Mamma Mia, and Katherine Johnson, who wrote the book, was joshing with her saying, I hear there was somebody else that was asked to do this, and they turned it down, and it got to me. Why did you get to me? And what they were saying was, there isn't a sort of A to Z. We go to this person, we do that. It's all, there's an element of alchemy that has to be considered in all of it. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think that's very, very true, and was very true in this process. Lynn, as I said, was the first person I started speaking to about it. And I had known Lynn, and Lynn is a double Pulitzer Prize winner for drama, for writing these very amazing, brilliant, thoughtful plays. So it didn't seem like a completely natural fit that you would call Lynn, but I knew from talking to her and also from mutual friends that she was very, very interested in Michael and that she had always wanted to write about Michael. So we sat down in my office one day in front of this very, very large book of Michael Jackson, which is called the Michael Jackson Opus, and started looking through these photos and talking about it. And she was really excited to take it on. And as I said, we started the process together initially, but then in thinking about a director, one of the things that people, I think, take a little bit for granted is Michael is known so much as a musical artist, but the reality is the impact that Michael Jackson had on dance and what dance looks like today is incalculable. It is massive. Before the things that Michael changed with his short films in the early 80s, dance was very much like the Motown, Supremes, people lining up in a line and doing moves. And he really transformed that and brought the level of choreography to a whole nother stratosphere. And you see it today, like the choreography that you see with Beyonce and Rihanna and all of these other artists, like had its seeds in what Michael did. And now Michael changed that. And so we felt like dance was a hugely important part of the story. So finding an artist who was extremely gifted and brilliant with doing storytelling through dance seemed really important to us, which is how we came upon Christopher Wheeldon as the director choreographer. I had seen, as Ed Lynn, American in Paris, and really loved the work he did with that. But it seemed like a very odd choice. And I did have people say to me, that's a very odd choice to bring in, like a world-renowned ballet choreographer.
I think for off the air, we'd probably have different words from an odd choice. Probably people thought you were crazy.
A bit, yes. I did get one of those phone calls as well. But Chris also was very passionate about Michael, and it had, when he was a dancer himself coming up, he had posters from Bad in his room, and I think Chris also thought I was a little bit crazy. I think, he said to someone after he got off the phone with me, "Do you think she wasn't sure who she was calling?" But but I was sure, and Chris
My goodness, that was an extraordinary kind of choice. But I'm interested that he also had that sort of, knowledge. Well, we all have the knowledge of Michael Jackson, but that it had affected him so personally, and having posters in his room and stuff. And here he is now being handed this extraordinary challenge of bringing together his work, but there is storytelling in the dance for sure. It's such a brilliant kind of connection, isn't it? With the way he works.
It's phenomenal. And no one does transitions like Christopher Wilton. Between Chris and the way that he works with his design team, it's absolutely otherworldly at moments. The way the scenes flow into each other, the movement. And it's, I think, one of the things that makes the show so successful is that it is always in motion. You don't have moments to look at your watch, think about what you might have for dinner. It's really spectacular. And Chris and Lynn, although coming from very different places, she being a very serious, well-respected playwright.
Yeah, as you say, Pulitzer Prize winner, my goodness.
She's the only living double Pulitzer Prize winner for drama.
Extraordinary.
And, he coming from this very exalted place in the dance world, but for whatever reason, they meshed incredibly well. And then we brought in David Holsenberg and Jason Michael Webb, who worked with us figuring out how to craft the music, weave it in, blend the music with it. And then everyone on the design team, they're all Tony winners, and they all worked very seamlessly together. The design elements in the show are all incredibly integrated with each other. The set was specifically, the idea of it was crafted so that there's all of these, what we refer to as set electrics. They're the lighting that's built into the set and the projections, so that everything works as one idea. And I think that as a producer, the most important decisions you make are the decisions about who you are putting together in that room to create the show. And if you get that right, many, many, many decisions will be easy. And if you get that wrong, everything is hard.
Yeah. I believe that your career to get to that point, in whatever it is, informs your decisions, obviously. I mean, you started your career in a very rock and roll way as a roadie with Johnny Thunders and the Ramones. I mean, that wouldn't necessarily be an equals Michael Jackson biopic.
No,
It's,
I was
so
very.
so I'm just, when I read that, and then your time being a sound designer, and then the whole extraordinary success in the music business. I mean, just that in itself is quite an incredible achievement for you to have done all of that, and then pour that experience into this project. It's part of the alchemy, as I was saying earlier, that you're bringing all that experience to it. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. I had a quite varied career. I worked for about 10 years in the theater doing sound. So I worked on a lot of shows.
So people can't bullshit you because you know exactly what you're talking about.
I've run cable in theaters. I've been up on a ladder and plugged things in. Yeah. I know kind of the narrows, certainly in the technical aspects, how the sausage gets made. So, but then I had the great, good fortune to sort of segue into the film business. And I worked as president of Worldwide Music for Sony Pictures for almost 20 years.
I mean, that in itself is phenomenal. My God, Sony.
Yeah.
Mega company.
Yeah, it was wonderful because I oversaw all the music for, both film scores and pop songs and soundtrack albums and all of those things for all of the movies that we made over all of the labels at Sony. And so over the years, it is literally hundreds of films that I had the fortune to work on. And you learn so much working with so many directors and so many teams and so many composers and musicians. And I think the experience of that and understanding really well what works in storytelling, what doesn't work in storytelling, how to deliver something that's going to excite an audience and leave an audience wanting more, all of those things that I learned in the film business really helped. But being able to now kind of come back to my original love and my original home, where, which is the theater, is fantastic with that knowledge. And I think I love artists and I love working with artists and trying to help artists create their best work.
I mean, you must have met many of the greatest world artists. Are you ever starstruck by anyone now these days, or do you just take it all for, oh, I know you, I'm Beyonce, schmaltzy?
I don't ever take any of it for granted. I love the fact that my career has allowed me to meet and work with and interact with so many great talents in a lot of areas. I love working with great directors. I loved working with great composers. Hans Zimmer, for example, has become over the years, after doing many, many, many projects, like a very dear friend. But there's also other producers like Barbara Broccoli, who produces the Bond movies. I worked on 4 of the Bond films with her. And that was like a wonderful collaboration. So, and most recently, honestly, being able to partner with Cameron Mackintosh and be in one of his theaters with my show, I have admired Cameron's unbelievable, incredible, brilliant talent for many, many, many years. So it's like the great thing about working in the field and having the career that I've had is that I've gotten to meet all of these people that I really admire. So I don't know if starstruck's the right word, but I think lucky is the right word.
Yeah, and you probably have an insight or an appreciation of people in a level because of all that informed experience you've had. So, you will get a sort of an extra dimension, I would think, and when you come together with someone like Cameron, because you're both working at a level and dealing with things that other mere mortals like myself never get to do. I'd like to stop for a minute and get the violins ready to play for that somber music for that moment. No, I'm only kidding. In terms of music nowadays, it's ever evolving. Of course it is. And if you think back 10 years, 20 years, it's different. Nowadays, do you feel that it's a very different world? Is it the way that artists evolve and come through? Do you think that still works in the same way? Is it talent will out kind of thing, or?
It's a really interesting point that you make, because I think the thing that is the most different is that when Michael Jackson was coming up, there was MTV and there were some radio stations that were nationwide in the US, and then it was a much less fragmented ecosystem. MTV was global, and if you were on MTV, everybody was seeing the same artists that were getting played on MTV. There were radio playlists that were a certain length, and if you were getting in rotation on those radio playlists, and everybody sort of listened to the same radio. Now with streaming, people listen to music and consume music in so many different ways. MTV isn't the force it used to be. Now you just go on your own computer and look around YouTube. It's not curated for people the same way and presented to people the same way. So I don't think that, you end up with as many well-known global hits and artists. Now, obviously, there can still be huge, huge artists who are globally influential, like Taylor Swift, like Beyonce. There are people who break through that, but it's not as frequent because the way people get their music is just different and much more self-selected. But I think the music is all great. And also, I think people tend to love the music they grew up with.
Yes, yes.
And tend to move on the music they grew up with even as they get older.
Yeah, no, I think what I'm hearing is it's harder, it's different, but is it harder? It's just different.
Yeah. I think it's harder in some ways and easier in some ways, but I don't think that getting to the level of sort of global recognition, I think that's incredibly difficult these days.
Yeah, yeah. Meanwhile, back on the West End stage, we have MJ the Musical, and it's also on Broadway. I was just interested to know your observations of producing in the West End versus Broadway. Is it virtually the same? Is it very different? How would you kind of sum that up?
I think that it is similar, but definitely has differences. And I think if you're a smart American coming to the West End, you need to be very open to and listen carefully to the people who've worked on the West End, so that you understand the market, understand
the subtleties. Yeah, and I would imagine the same would apply the other way. The British producers going to Broadway need to listen to how you plug into that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think part of the thing that's deceptive is that it is similar, and so you just have to not be deceived by the fact that just because it's similar, that it means it's the same.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Lia, I could be talking to you all day. This is so good. But just one last thing I noticed in your credits, one of them is that you are included in a task force. And I was just slightly curious to know what the task force was.
Oh,
in the program, it's the Recording Academy's Musical Theatre Task Force.
Oh, it's a group of people. The Recording Academy are the people who do the Grammys. And the Musical Theatre Task Force is a group of us who all work in musical theatre. But I actually am in the Recording Academy in the producers and engineers wing, interestingly enough, because that's when I got into the Recording Academy. But we spend time trying to connect with people creating cast albums, to get more exposure for cast albums, to further musical theater within the larger music ecosystem.
And I suppose going back to the thing earlier about it's harder now to navigate. What you're doing will be very helpful in terms of the promoting of musical theatre within that huge, very kind of extraordinarily difficult navigation of how to do it. That will be extremely helpful.
Yeah, so that we can get our music and the music that's being created in our theaters and that's put into cast recordings out to the broadest audience possible.
Well, thank you, Lia. I have very much enjoyed it, and I thank you for taking the time today to speak to us.
Thank you for having me. It was really wonderful, and I'm so excited to have MJ on the West End.
My thanks to Lia Vollack, and MJ the Musical is playing at the Prince Edward Theatre in London. Go to DMT's website for information on the show and tickets. Until next time.